Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 96 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I'm your co-host, Sam, here with my other co-host, Sean. We are here to discuss episode 6, season 2 of The Rings of Power. Sean, how you doing?
I am doing well. I got both my flu shot and COVID shot in my same arm after work today, so I'm
Oh,
a
boy.
little sore. But it's a reminder, everybody, get your vaccinations.
We're coming up on the season, the flu
season
and
is
cold
coming.
season. Well, hopefully more enjoyable than getting 2 shots in the same arm today was this episode of The Rings of Power. I think we hinted at it in our coverage of last episode. You'd already watched ahead and you said this was continuing the upward trajectory. I watched, my initial impression was not as positive as the episode 5 in season 2, but through our conversations, some of those rough spots were smoothed out. I still have my critiques, but we can get into all of that as we discuss this episode. Before we go there, do you want to give us the recap?
Yes, here is the recap. Celebrimbor focuses on making rings for men. Annatar offers to take care of Eregion's administration and gives him a container which he claims to hold mithril. Outside the city, Adar tells Galadriel that the crown of Sauron's master, Morgoth, was able to destroy Sauron's previous physical form. He believes that together, the crown and the elven rings of power could destroy Sauron for good. Elendil refuses to pledge his loyalty to Ar-Pharazôn and is sentenced to trial by abyss, in which he would be thrown into the sea to face a giant creature, the sea worm. Miriel claims the right to be tried in Elendil's stead. The sea worm then spares her life, and the faithful hail her as the Queen of the Sea. Tom takes the stranger to a forest of dead trees where he is meant to find a magic staff. The stranger has a vision of Nori and Poppy being threatened by the Dark Wizard and must decide between helping his friends and fulfilling his destiny. Galadriel realizes that Sauron has lured Adar's army to Eregion because he does not have one of his own. Adar ignores her concerns and begins the siege of Eregion. That was the full episode. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good episode. You didn't enjoy it as much as I did.
No.
First thing we're going to talk about is Annatar or Sauron. For me, I feel super bad for Celebrimbor.
Oh, yeah. Poor guy.
He is spiraling. I feel bad for him. He's stressed. He's anxious. Now he's hyper-focused on creating these rings for men. Annatar agrees to take over administration, I think, for Eregion. And there's a scene after, I think it's like right during as the siege is beginning, like the armies of Adar are moving towards Eregion. And Sauron cuts his hand, kind of mutters something to himself and closes his eyes, and then basically casts an illusion spell inside of Celebrimbor's mind. And when Celebrimbor walks out into the courtyard of Eregion, he sees the sun is out,
Children are playing.
There's birds, everything. People are like painting things, like it's
Perfect day.
Perfectly
lovely day. Yeah.
And then as soon as he re-enters the tower, you see Annatar walking through the courtyard, and people are screaming and running past him, and he climbs to the battlements and sees the army of Adar approaching. I thought that was a spectacular show of Sauron's power in that moment.
That was good. I like that. It drove home the idea of Sauron the Deceiver. He's not just a physically powerful entity who can bend orcs to his will and do all this great works, but he can weave spells, and this was the strongest demonstration of this yet. I think in the end of season 1 we saw these visions that Galadriel had due to her interaction with Sauron, but this was especially powerful, and also because it seems to be just the kind of part of the spell that Sauron has seemingly cast over Celebrimbor. The stress causing him to forget people's names. His assistant. This is, he forgets the name of the only elf there for what was has even been introduced that we've even had in scenes. So seemingly, pretty important character forgets her name. Yeah, and he's just got this like kind of little smirk on his face when he's all
Mhm.
by himself. And he has that a couple times this episode because he does more than just cast this one spell. But that was to me, that was a highlight of the episode, I would say, was seeing this demonstration of his power.
I also think the cutting of his hand is a callback to in the Silmarillion when Anatar is taken to Numenor, which, spoiler, not spoiler, we don't know if this is going to happen in the show. A lot
Happened.
of stuff, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the books that hasn't happened. So it's hard to say. But there's a cult of Morgoth that is founded. And we've even seen it with the Dark Wizard in this season.
Mm-hmm.
He cuts his hand to
That's right. That's right.
summon one of those cultists. So there is dark magic, blood magic that's used, and this was an example of Sauron using it as well. Continuing with Sauron, we have his evil plans all coming to fruition, and it's seen in a couple moments in this episode. We have the Balrog, the power of the dwarvish ring over King Durin is forcing him to delve deeper, eventually leading to the destruction of Moria or Khazad-dûm, as we know in the Fellowship of the Ring. We have Adar's army arriving at Eregion, which we've referenced in the recap. Galadriel kind of trying to say, "Hey, Adar, this is all he wants. He wants you to be here to destroy Eregion." And then finally, we haven't really got a direct reference of this yet, but I believe the army of Lindon, which we kind of got at the tail end of the last episode, I believe is already on its way to Mordor and will not be arriving in time to assist Eregion. And I think that is also part of Sauron's evil plan for what's going on.
More as a misdirection, or as will they be attacked by some other force?
No, misdirection. They're not
Yeah, yeah,
available to help
yeah,
Eregion.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I buy that. I think we've gotten a few hints, right, of both in the trailers and in the next on episode, the trailers that come at the end of the episodes for the episode following, of Elrond asking Durin for assistance. I think I've said this before. He uses the phrase "I need your axe," and I'm assuming that's metaphor for he needs the army of Khazad-dûm because Lyndon's army is gone. But we also have these like very clearly scenes of Elrond leading a large cavalry charge. So there is some force of elves that will come on, but it seems like they will be insufficient to overcome the army of Adar, and they will need the help of the dwarves. Did you pick up on the one line about it was in the conversation between the two Durins where the elder says, we're going to double down on mining the mithril basically, and then an army armed and armored in mithril will be like unstoppable or something like that. I wonder if we are going to see dwarves in like full mithril kit by the end of this episode or this season, and if they show up to kind of save the day from the army, even though Sauron manages to escape or something along those lines.
I don't know. I think that would happen too fast. I think
Yeah.
to mine enough mithril to arm a dwarvish army, I think we would have the Balrog and the downfall of Khazad-dûm by that point, because we have like even the references to Bilbo's mithril shirt, like how impressive that one little shirt is. I don't know if we're ever going to see an army of plus if they had an army's worth of mithril, like weapons and armor, that would all exist somewhere still. And mithril would be devalued. So if we're going to talk about basic economics,
I think the Balrog is going to melt the shit out of a lot of it, and it'll be buried underneath caverns and things like that the Balrog brings down on Khazad-dûm during its downfall. And then canonically, Sauron had a huge appetite for mithril and would buy it or steal it or have his orcs go and take it. And I think a lot of it was used in the creation or the recreation, the re-strengthening of the Barad-dûr, and then also the creation of Grond. So they're I think they can introduce a lot of mithril, and it wouldn't be game breaking. But yeah, I think you're right. It would be a little accelerated for an army for a substantial force of mithril armed and armored dwarves to show up. But one can hope. All right, other
And
parts of Sauron's evil plan. We've talked. Anything else that you want to say on this?
no, we covered all three of the phases of the plan that I think were discussed in this episode.
So the one thing I wanted to just go on a little bit of a not a tangent, but we get his. I guess he has a vision, or there is a scene where he is having this conversation. He goes to Khazad-dûm to try to get more mithril. They say no. We get a hint, and I think we agree on this that he went there either expecting or wanting them to say no to providing more mithril. Do we agree on that?
Yeah, because he wants them to.
He wants them to be at tension with one another, pretty much.
Yes.
He wants the king to kind of go further down this path of greed and paranoia. So in that scene, I think after this conversation, there's a Balrog that appears in the like torch or the brazier, the flames of a brazier sconce. Do we also agree that we think that was purely something that Sauron had in his mind? Like that was him either reminding himself or learning or reiterating that the Balrog was in Khazad-dûm and kind of was a chess piece that's on the board that he will move into place when it's appropriate?
For sure.
Okay.
I think he knows that the Balrog exists. They've kind of shown that like the evil power coming from Mount Doom with like the creation of earthquakes happening underneath the Misty Mountains as well. I think Sauron kind of has like a feel of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that vision of the Balrog was just giving the television viewer a glimpse into his mind.
Yeah, that's how I interpret it as well. I don't know if I completely love the execution on that. I think since they are now giving us more explicit demonstration of Sauron's power with the illusion of that Celebrimbor experienced, I would have been totally fine with a demonstration of his telepathic abilities, of his remote sensing abilities, of how, maybe, he's not going to be able to astrally project himself into every room and eavesdrop on Galadriel and Gilgalad, but he should be able to sense the presence of another powerful evil Maya that's not too far from his physical location. I think that they could have done this prior to now, where like maybe he's like meditating or something like that, and he has a vision of the Balrog, and so just they can establish that he knows about it earlier. I would be totally fine with that. They didn't do it, so whatever. We get other hints at his power, but I think it would have been okay to do that.
While we're in Khazad-dûm, let's continue with politics and relationships that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, just this, it's a little bit of a roller coaster between Prince Durin and King Durin. With, the season 1, the end of it, he's disinherited, and then he gets back in the good graces because he facilitates the exchange that leads to the rings, and then he voices objection over the rings. And then in this episode, he and Disa, Prince Durin and Disa, kind of decide to go rogue and directly interfere with the king's wishes. So to a certain extent, we've got like a treason theme happening here, right? We've got treason in Khazad-dûm. We got treason on Numenor. We have Galadriel and Adar potentially working together. That's could be seen as treasonous. So interesting bedfellows. And I like the fact that all of it can be tied to the influence of Sauron. I think that is an appropriate use of his power and malignant influence. So kudos to that. Anything
Again,
that jumped in?
we're actually saying good things about
Yeah, no,
some of the things the show's doing, which is
I think
incredible.
And I'm at the, I mean, I I don't need them to be subtle about certain things. I just need them to be executed well. We talked in the season 1. One of our big critiques was this mystery box approach to who is Halbrand? Is he Sauron? Wink, wink, wink. Who's the stranger? Is it Gandalf? And we still don't have resolution to that. But they don't need to do that if they tell us a good story. And I kind of like it when people tell us what they're doing. That is a Tolkienian thing. There's there is maybe only a handful of examples of characters who are shrouded in mystery, and even then they don't later become super important. I'm trying to think of any counter examples to this, and none come to mind. If you have one that you want to talk about, we can, but they can be explicit about this stuff. Like, we know Sauron's evil. Show that he's evil. You don't need to hide it. You can show that he's powerful. You don't need to hide it. We'd be fine with it, because otherwise I think they're doing a good job in demonstrating all this.
That's why we referenced if they would have in the beginning of episode 1 of season 2, if that would have been the introduction to season 1, and we would have had none of that mystery box shit
Yeah.
of who is Sauron, I feel like I would have received this show so much better
Yeah.
from day one. And I think my overall opinion of Rings of Power would have shifted dramatically if they would have just come out and said, this is Sauron.
Yeah. I mean, I think I said it in our coverage of those first episodes. They could have they could have made Sauron's identity a mystery to Sauron as he was kind of reforming. We, the audience, knew and saw him going along this path. There was no mystery there. You're making they could have done that.
That's
They didn't do it either way.
I don't want a Darth Revan Knights of the Old Republic storyline. That's stealing that storyline
Yeah, I guess
verbatim.
that is kind of a huge trope too, and a lot of it's like every Elder Scrolls game is like that too. It's like, oh,
Oh, you're really the master thief this entire time. Oh,
yeah. I
cool.
guess Baldur's Gate is that too with the Dark Urge, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
okay, so fine, I stand corrected. But again, they didn't. It doesn't need to be a mystery. Things can be mysteries on the screen to the characters, but not necessarily mysteries to the audience, and it's still a good show, and it could still be good drama.
If we would have known Sauron is Sauron, and we know the entire time that Sauron is like pretending to be this Hallbrand, that's a much better show to me.
Hmm.
But then we talked about the news articles that were coming out as we were preparing for this season. But when your actor who's playing Sauron doesn't know he's playing Sauron until he's filming episode 4 of season 1, like, to me, that is this show in a nutshell, and
Hmm.
why it's been so poorly planned and managed.
Hmm.
That if they would have taken time and done it right, I think it would have been a much better product in the
Yeah.
end. But
I
we're
mean,
dying on a hill there.
no, I was thinking back to when we did our 2 podcasts about how we would do a second age show. And I think both of us showed a little bit more respect for the timeline that was in the Silmarillion and in the appendices, and much more like straight adaptation. This season has shown to me that you don't necessarily need to do it that way. In fact, I think you very easily could, I mean, they are going to do it, put the War of the Elves and Sauron and the Forging of the Rings very close to the end of the Second Age and the founding of Numenor and the War of the Last Alliance. It's possible to do that. I just think, again, season 1 was still so muddy that we're still kind of climbing out of that. You mentioned Charlie Vickers as Sauron, or Halbrand slash Sauron. I just have to say, his portrayal of Anatar is very, very good.
Yeah,
I think he is doing a fantastic job as this wispy, um, sincere guy who also has this core of
evil
evil
and malevolence.
yeah, and like his facial expressions are so good at communicating that. I think they go to the well a little bit too much of having him smirk to the camera. It was good the first few times. They don't need to keep doing that because he's otherwise so very good at telling us what he's doing. Like, he has a range. They can use it. But yeah,
This show, the show has characters that are done really, really well, and then characters that are done horrifically. So, like, the really good characters, Sauron slash Hallbrand
uh-huh,
slash Anatar, great.
uh-huh. Yep.
Tom Bombadil so far, great.
Okay.
Celebrimbor, I
Yep.
think, great.
Fantastic. Yep.
Círdan the Shipwright, great.
Hmm.
I'll even go so far as to say our Pharazôn, I think, has been great so far.
Yeah, no, great. And like great actor, great performance.
Elendil Season 1, not great. Season 2, I'm really warming up to him.
I like him as a um kind of down and out guy, right? Because
Mhm.
we know him as he's like the
Lord of
ex
Gondor.
Lord of Gondor, like Lord of Arnor, like the High King in exile, but he's in exile, right? There's always this like
Mhm.
hint of tragedy to him. And obviously, like this is not a spoiler because it's very well known. He dies, but he dies nobly, defeating Sauron. So yeah, I kind of like him as this down on his luck guy who's now got to like kind of rebuild himself around his faith and the
Yeah.
relationships that he has with yeah, that's good.
And then on top of that, another one for that list of good characters, Adar. Both
Yes.
renditions of Sam Hazeldine and Joseph Mawley.
Yeah.
So, like, those are all of the good characters. The bad characters that are written very, very poorly, Galadriel,
Yep.
Gilgalad,
Yep.
your hobbits
Yep.
and halflings, stewards, all of them. Fuck all the halflings. And then the stranger. Like, there's so. Oh, Elrond. I like Elrond as well. I
I
think
was gonna say,
he's.
yeah,
Yeah. We forgot about
he's a
our
good one.
boy Elrond, half elven. But he's good too. And it's like there's so many instances of good characters, but then there's so many instances of just terrible writing, terrible character development
Mm-hmm.
that that's why the show is infuriating. Because like this season, these episodes that we really, really care about and that we've liked these last couple episodes have focused on the characters that we like and have focused less on Galadriel, hobbits, and Gilgalad. Like we haven't seen them really in episodes 4, 5, 6. So I don't know. Like I just want more of the stuff I like. Keep ignoring showrunners, the stuff that you failed at. Like we've said in a previous episode,
Yeah.
make Elrond our
Yeah.
protagonist
Yeah.
going forward.
I mean, we I don't like the scenes with Galadriel. And I mean, I don't like Galadriel in those scenes. I still just don't I just don't buy her as the character who would be in those scenarios. And it's not that like the overall plot could still happen, but I just don't like her. I just don't like what they're doing with her. Like she should she should be in the show, but she should have a completely different role, I think.
I disagree slightly. I
Okay.
think they could. I think they're just doing it wrong. they're
Okay.
they're just writing it poorly. Like you could have her be the general lieutenant of the Northern armies or whatever it is. But what we've said about season 1 and season 2, she's just not. They don't write her to be smart. Like
Yeah, I
I
mean that's
have I have no qualm with any of the stuff that they've had her do. It's how they're having her do it. Like make her let her be intelligent, let her be wise and still do the things that she's doing and have it make sense, but they're not doing it that way. So I'm not saying like introduce Celeborn, marry her off and ship her to Lothlorien. Like I'm not saying any of that. They can keep her in the show and have her be the actiony character that they've set her up to be, but she's not smart. And we need her
yeah.
to be smart.
I mean,
and
that was one of her most defining qualities in the movies and in the lore. She was the one who saw through Anatar's disguise. She was the one who suspected Feanor, who was um, a gray character back in the first age. And
he was pretty
but
shitty. He's not really gray.
well, I mean,
I
yes.
view him as bad guy personally.
Okay, fine. Was I however, she's not without flaws, and that's where you can get drama, right? This the flaw of pride. The issue is she is prideful but not competent. And so somebody who is prideful and not competent is a narcissist. And people don't like rooting for narcissists. So she's a very hard person, she's a very hard character as portrayed to root for. Whereas there are other characters who don't have that unfortunate quality. Like you can still have a prideful character. Like I would say that Celebrimbor is prideful, but he's a good character because he's one competent at his role of being a smith, but also flawed and fallen now at this or heavily under this influence. And I'm both rooting for him. I know where things are going, and so there's a bit of tragedy there,
Mhm.
but he's a good, compelling character, and we just don't have that with Galadriel. Real quick,
Less. Oh, okay.
on the inconsistency in kind of the writing, the first 6 episodes of the season have a different writer.
Really?
Yeah. The final two are JD and Patrick, the
Got it.
showrunners. So, I mean, we'll see what happens there, but at least it's the same two people. I mean, and I know that when you have one credited writer, there's still a writer's room where ideas are being bandied back and forth. But when you're when you have what we've talked about as very bad lines of dialogue, it just, it betrays a poorly executed writing process. I think having a smaller batch of writers who have a better collaborative workplace where they're challenging each other, we might not get some of the inconsistencies that we do, right? Like I don't necessarily think some of these characters are, and some of the plots are as strong as they would be if you had one unitary vision from a writer or potentially like two writers who are really good collaborators.
Last thing we want to talk about is the little bit of Numenor that we get and the test of the faithful, like that judgment test. Uh, I really like it. I think it's a cool concept. It kind of harkens back to like Greek mythology of the
Hmm.
gods. Like,
Hmm.
what's the will of the gods? Here's a great test. We're going to call a giant sea serpent to Numenor via these like horns that we're going to blow to summon this creature. We're going to throw you in a pool, like a tide pool, and it's going to suck you out into the ocean. And then basically Olmo is going to judge you, the god of water. So I thought it was a really cool concept. I thought it was even cooler. The whole, because the act that Elendil was accused of was done in the name of Muriel, she can, it's just like really drawing out like these ancient laws that exist in this world and in Numenor in particular. And then you have like the guy thumbing through this really old book and he's like, oh shit, yeah, no, she's right. Like this law exists.
I was thinking of that visual specifically because like I didn't think that was the way to execute that. Right? Like the guy with the book shouldn't be like literally. It was just a little too unserious. Like the the law scholars or whatever should go and be consulted about how this happens, or the priests need to be called in. But like just whipping out the book, like, oh yeah, here we go. You're to
Well,
be thrown in the ocean at dawn or whatever it was. It was just like again, that's a very minor nitpick on my
yeah,
part.
I think that that's very pedantic of you.
Here's
My
another.
issue with that scene was our Pharazôn saying, all right, throw him in the water. And then the guards just step back
Yeah,
and Elendil goes to walk in.
I
I
had
was
a
like,
similar thing.
you just said throw him in and the guards don't do anything. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's what I had a problem with.
I had a problem with that too. I had a problem with the fact that Aarion says like you're going to be thrown in at dawn or something like that. Or where's the actual line? Yeah, it's going to happen at dawn. Yet she's saying that as it's light outside, and then there's no indication that any time like a whole nother day has passed, and then they have the trial. So that was just one of those things where why do you go out of your way to like reference at a point in time if you're not going to abide by it in your visual representation of what happens?
Like
Just say like
give us a scene that night of Muriel coming to him.
yes, like that
And
would be the
then,
perfect setup
yeah.
for yeah, and that was a little weird. Let's see what else. So then I think I had some similar issues to my coronation complaint where you just have some like you have some important people who observe this entire ritual, but then you just have some like rando peasants that are there. And then it seems to be a very, very, very small number of people, a very small group that observed this trial by abyss, which I just like, just get some more people and get some more extras, get some like CGI a larger crowd of people so that when you use the crowd canned noise, the applause effect number 4, which like I caught on to that. Whoever mixed the episode, I don't think did a great job. It's like it makes sense. You're like, hey, you have like an entire stadium worth of applause, and there's like 12 people, most of whom don't like Muriel to begin with. So just little complaints about the composition of scenes compared to like all the background stuff happening in scenes as opposed to just my reaction to the main action.
Otherwise, I thought it was a very cool scene of the sea worm pulling Muriel in and then basically judging her and then sending her back to the shore. I thought that was a cool concept. And I liked the relative reference to like Greek mythology of like
Hmm.
trial by gods and all of that. But
How do you think this scene fits as compared to uh, Sauron slash Halbrand's confrontation with the creature that we saw on episode one?
what do you mean?
We kind of get this flashback to Halbrand in the
I
water
mean,
after.
I know the scene you're referencing, but
Yeah.
what's your question between
Well,
what
so
we
like
have with Muriel and
yeah, so we have two characters. We have Sauron and we have Muriel. Both of them are confronted by this sea creature, and in each case, the sea creature does not attack them. I think I don't necessarily know if somehow Sauron influenced the creature to
that's
leave him alone. I think there's an
that's my
implication there.
assessment. Like
Yeah, I think
there's your difference between the two. Sauron influenced his will over it to push it away. And in the case of Muriel, it's basically it's legit judgment of the Valar. It's
yeah,
Olmo. To me, that's the difference between the two.
yeah. I just my I mhm.
I don't know what you're getting at. This
Yeah,
is a weird
I don't know if
line of questioning.
I'm trying to explore. I'm thinking as I'm talking.
This is great content.
Yeah, this quiet dead air as I'm talking. I don't know. I don't know. I guess like my question is, do we think we are supposed to draw anything from the fact that these two characters went through similar encounters? Does it matter? Does it mean anything? I don't know. I don't think it.
I don't think it means anything. They've already established that this creature is just out there, like fucking with ships and stuff. So it's a threat that they've already introduced multiple times because it's been in season one, season two now.
Okay.
I think it's they're just going back to the well for something that they've already introduced. And if they didn't know where the show was going to begin with season one, it could have this was just like a throwaway monster.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in season two, where they're like, oh shit, we need to have an answer for Halbrand is Sauron, and let's do that backstory. Then I think they just threw it in to that,
I
and
guess
here we are.
so here's where there's a little bit of dissonance for me then. This is where my discontent is coming from. This creature is somehow in tune to the desires of the Valar,
Mm-hmm.
right? So why is it attacking ships that are just on the open ocean that are just full of people? Are we to believe that the Valar want those people to be dead?
Oh, it's Olmo. I mean, if we're gonna go like in depth Silmarillion, Olmo also controls thunderstorms and shit that happen on the sea, and people die in natural causes from thunderstorms. So this creature is a natural element of the world. It's neither good nor bad. It just exists. I think Sauron has the power as a Maiar to influence it a little bit to get it to
Hmm.
not attack him. And I think it also can be influenced by Olmo as well. So it's summoned for this judgment. It through the will of Olmo, judges Muriel, and there's
Okay.
your answer.
So it's like wine. Wine can be good, wine can be bad. Wine can also be holy when the right words are said in its presence.
Yeah. I think it honestly to me it comes down to just nature isn't good or inherently bad. It's just it is what it is. And like if we're talking D&D, it'd be like it's a lawful neutral god.
Yeah. I think they didn't know what they were doing in season one, and they had a cool creature that people liked. And so they brought it back in episode one where it fit with Sauron's backstory. And then they did it again in this episode because the sea is always right.
Yep. And I don't think the people like you just said the line people liked it. I think people in the writers room liked it.
I thought it was cool. I thought the
I mean,
creature
I
was
thought it was
cool.
cool, but I wasn't sitting there going like, "Oh man, I really liked that monster from episode 1. I need it 2 more times." I
Oh no,
think
I
it
mean,
was.
I was certainly not like, yeah, give me more sea monster, but yeah, I don't think there was much. I don't think there was a whole lot there. They're implying that there might be a lot there. They are okay with us thinking that there's a lot there, but I don't think there actually is
No,
in their from their construction.
I think everything that I've said in the last like 3 minutes is me using my knowledge of the source material to try to come up with a answer for your question.
Yeah,
I don't think the writers were thinking anything along the
yeah,
lines of what I came up with, but
yeah.
to me, that's what makes the scene make sense.
The,
The
can I say one more thing?
Sure.
That scene completely falls apart when you remember that Muriel is blind and she has no fucking idea what this thing looks like or is doing.
Yeah, she's not scared. That's
Yeah,
the
she
ideal
like,
situation.
yes. It's like, okay, it could have been like some seaweed that got wrapped around her foot or something like
Yeah.
that, and it would have all been the same. Anyway, okay.
The last thing in Numenor and the last thing we're going to talk about in this episode is a potential Elendil and Muriel love connection. You brought up the question, do I think it's happening in the show? I do think it's happening in the show. They've made it very evident and clear that there is some kind of relationship between the two of them. But if you are familiar with the story, you know that it's not going to come to anything. So I don't think it really matters. I think it
Yeah.
does, but it's not going to affect the lore or anything moving forward. So I think we're going to be okay.
Well, it could be this additional dynamic in the relationship between Farazan, Muriel, and Elendil, that kind of this triangle here. Because I think we've talked about on this podcast before, and it's well known in the among book fandom, but Farazan forcibly marries Muriel as a
Mm-hmm.
way to strengthen his legitimacy. And I think we both mentioned that that could be one of the potential moves coming out of this trial of the abyss, where seemingly Farazan has been undercut in his legitimacy because he claimed, or it was claimed on his behalf, the blessing of the Valar as manifested by the eagle arriving as when he took the throne, and now the person he usurped has been seemingly endorsed by the Valar, and a group of people are calling her queen again. So I could see him forcibly marrying her as a way to kind of unite these two factions, even if it is, again, forcible and temporary.
For sure.
I think that's it.
Yeah, close us out. I really have to pee.
All this talk about the ocean. All right, everybody, thank you for listening to episode 96 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We are continuing our coverage of season 2 of the Rings of Power. We are recording this on Tuesday and will be posted some point this week. And then look for the next episode, episode 7, in our season 2 coverage after it comes out later this week. So watch the space. If you liked what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Find us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, Nerdy Things. Send us an email, elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. And thank you for your continued listening. We will talk to you later.